I wondered whether you had any sort of standout stories that come to mind, anything that particularly stands out to you.
There's a few that the letters are so different. And some people might just write a poem, or they might do a very simple letter and they'll crochet a heart, or they'll put a tea bag in. Just those little lovely touches where that really shows they're just really thinking about the person. But there are a few letters that have stood out for me over the years. We have quite a lot of Duke of Edinburgh students who write for us for their volunteer module. And some of them, particularly the older students, just write the most beautiful letters. And there was one student who started off, "What is your favourite time of day?" And then they went on to explain that their favourite time of day was 7 o'clock in the evening in the summer. And they just wrote a whole letter about why. And so it encapsulated everything, because it was kind of what the world looked like at 7 o'clock in the evening. But also there were some smells coming from the kitchen because, a parent was making a meal for them. And then there was the sounds of, that's when my brother gets on his Xbox and I can hear him shouting at the Xbox. So there was a whole family going on behind them, and a whole world of nature, of what nature looked like at 7 o'clock in the evening going on in front of them. So that was wonderful. There was a woman who used to write to us from Brazil. Her husband had cancer. So she used to write, and they owned a hill farm in Brazil. Oh my goodness, her letters were she just used to take you on a seasonal walk through the hill farm. And she'd just be saying, "So I'm now in the polytunnel and there are tomatoes and chilies and the lettuce are coming through, and I can hear a toucan now flying by." And you were just, her letters were quite magical. You were just transported to Brazil, to this hill farm, which was amazing. And she used to write every few months, so you got a whole seasonal kind of thing. And then we had a letter from a woman who wrote 25 reasons not to get a dog. And she wrote this list of things like their breath smells, they take up all the room in the bed, you have to pick up their poo. And then at the end it said there is only one reason why you might want to get a dog, and that was because it will love you unconditionally for the whole of its life. So some really quirky. We have, I think, our oldest writer, who's nearly 90. She lives in Winchester. And she writes the most beautiful letters. She just writes about her day. So often her day will involve sitting under the apple tree and watching the sparrows on her bird table, and then watching the squirrels come and this battle for the seeds and the nuts, and then going back in the house and baking an apple crumble, and what that smells like and what that tastes like, and then she might have a piano lesson. Oh. And her letters are so simple and so beautiful, but you're with her in her day. And that's the thing that all of the letters do. They just take you to another place, and you can tell that the people who've written them have got just as much, if not more, out of the writing of the letters than even the people who are reading them. Mm-hmm. Because they've just taken some time. It's almost like journaling. Yeah. And the power that people, the therapeutic power of journaling, is sort of like you've journaled for half an hour. And you've just shared, and because you never know the person who receives the letter, you can tell them some stuff that you wouldn't perhaps tell other people. Or you can, if you're really creative, but you have, maybe a really high-powered job, and creativity isn't part of your day at work, to come home and think, oh, now I can talk about, what I did at the weekend, and, because I went swimming. I love outdoor swimming, and that's what I did, and that's what I want to tell you about. We have a woman she has 4 children, and she said, every other week I say to them, it is now writing 30 minutes. And she said, I take myself off, and none of them are allowed to come and bother me. And for 30 minutes, I just write a letter for Donate a Letter. And she said, and sometimes I have a biscuit.
Too right. Too right. Wow.
We often get people who just will message us and say, oh, I know I got a letter today. It arrived just at the right time. I'd just come back from the hospital and the news wasn't great. And there was a letter and it just let me know somebody was out there thinking of me. And we also have really freaky things like people will say, gosh, I received a letter and the woman used to go on holiday to the same place on the same island that I used to go to. And she wrote all the same things like I would have written if I was writing the letter. And you just say, oh, and, and that's, spooky things like that happen.
Yeah. I love these stories, and I think it's amazing. That just really shows the sort of power of writing and creative writing and what you can do. And I feel like creative writing sort of slightly scares me because it makes it sound like you need to do something unusual with the writing that you're creating. But I think actually it's almost the prompts are allowing you to be creative within it, right?
Creativity just means you can be yourself, because we spend a lot of our time being what other people expect us to be. Maybe because we have to achieve things or we have to show up for somebody in a certain way to support them. But I think when you can just be yourself, that's when you can be creative. And that's all my letters were to Brian. I was just telling him about the real me. And at the same time, unbeknown to me, he was keeping a journal of his experience, which is what we then used to create the book that we had published. And when he showed me some of those journal entries, I was like, wow, Brian, I was getting to know you at this time. This is not the Brian that you showed to me. And he said, no, but this is what the real Brian was going through and experiencing. So he found a creative outlet for himself in the journaling to get him through that period of his life. But he was still having to show up as a different person for other people.